check out those videos I did, but literally one of my submissions vlogs from a few years ago, I'm crying. And I think it can be very confusing when the industry is sending all these messages or signals that maybe what you're working on or your particular background or identity is really sought after, and then you actually get to the business part of the process and it's just capitalism. Where's the POC money? I'm looking under the table for it. Where's the POC money? Submissions is one of those processes that can be really difficult and trying for any writer, but especially new writers. And as someone that is entering book submissions for the second time right now, literally today, I want to give a guide on what the book submissions process is for writers that are aiming to be traditionally published, and also some tips and considerations you can have going into it so you feel more prepared, so you're not surprised, and how to kind of handle your stress. So if this is something that you'd be interested in, like, comment, and subscribe, and stick around for this video because I'm going to be giving you lots and lots of information. So to start, my name is Prince. I make videos and content online about the writing life, about Black history, about travel. And mostly when I explore writing, I like to debunk different parts of the process because I'm a queer Black writer. I've had to research and learn a lot in order to even get my own understanding. And I've also had to fight through gatekeepers, stress, confusion, sadness, anxiety along the way during the process to get my first book published, which is actually right here. It's titled When They Tell You to Be Good. I went on submissions with it in 2021 and it came out in 2022. For the past 4 years, meaning since 2020, I've been working on a novel. Finally, it's going to be out in the world. So if you haven't seen my two other I'm finishing my novel vlogs, check those out. They're on my channel. I have other videos exploring different writing residencies I've done and different places I've traveled to work on this book. So book submissions is first, it's a part of the process of being traditionally published. And for those that don't know, when you're trying to publish a book, traditional publishing is when you try to sell the rights for your book to a publisher. Your publisher agrees on how they want to edit the manuscript with you, where it's going to be sold, how many copies are going to be out there, as opposed to self-publishing, which has been out there for the last 15, 20 years, where you can go on a website or you can hire a service to edit your book, upload your manuscript, sell it yourself online, or even distribute it to bookstores, XYZ, or even through your own personal platforms. So book submissions relates to the process of being traditionally published. And that's why it's important to kind of break it down, because there's many different parts to it. And I kind of view submissions as the before, during, and after. So we're going to kind of break it down this way. So typically, as a writer that doesn't even have an agent, ideally, you want to have a finished manuscript that's as polished as possible as you can get it, whether this means you doing your own edits and revisions, whether this means going to workshops, whether this means finding beta readers, feedback partners. But once your manuscript is ready, you start to go on the query process, which is querying is when you pitch your manuscript to an agent and you seek literary representation. A literary agent is going to help you sell your book. They're going to help advocate for you throughout the publishing process, editing process, XYZ. They might even help you figure out where you can get your writing out there in the world in other ways. And typically your agents make anywhere from 15 to 20% of whatever you earn. You should never have an agent try to charge you directly. If they are, it's a scam. Acquire an agent, you sign your contract with them, you come to your terms of agreement. Typically your agent, based on your manuscript, they will either say it's ready, let's enter the submissions process, or your agent will say, hey, I have some things in this manuscript that I think we should zhush in order to make it as sellable as possible. So let's have a phone call and talk about what some of these changes are. And typically this phone call can happen sometimes after you sign with an agent, but typically it should be a part of the conversation that you have with your agent before you sign with them, because you don't want to sign with an agent that says like, oh, I want you to rewrite the whole book, when your intention maybe working with the agent is someone who can help it polish it, understands where it's at, and how to make it better, and doesn't want to drastically change it. Once you edit your manuscript with your agent, which can take anywhere from a month or two, 3 months, half a year, it depends on the range and the scope of the edits. Then your agent will tell you, hey, I think it's ready. It's time to go on book submissions. Let's start this process. Your literary agent coming up with a list of editors and publications that they want to send out a pitch letter to. And agents work differently. Some agents do one big submission round. Some agents do different rounds that are based on certain goals or considerations, whether it be wanting to pitch to the big five or mid-level publishers, or the more indie or smaller presses or university presses, depending on the book genre, placement XYZ. Your agent makes a list of editors, and then you and your agent kind of have conversations. You go through your considerations, and when they give you the list of editors, your agent might also have a pitch letter to show you as well. And a pitch letter is usually like a page-long document that gives a really enticing description of your book with all of the different characters and exciting plot points involved. It usually has your headshot, and then beneath it, it might have your accolades or different press you might have from other writing related things. Basically, a letter making your book look good and also showing your writing history on some shape or level. And then you will have a submissions start date. And submissions can look like a lot of different things. It can go a lot of different ways. Some submissions processes can take a month, a week, numerous months. I remember with my first book, my first submissions process, I think took 6 months. And then the second one, I think took like 3 months. And we got a lot of rejections. We got a lot of different kind of manuscript requests. But typically when you go on submissions, and there are a number of different ways that editors at publishing houses can respond to your submissions letter. So the first can be a form submission, which is typically when an editor will probably just copy and paste a general rejection, and they might plug in a line or two or a couple of lines of feedback. This is the most frustrating way to kind of enter and deal with feedback during submissions, because you can kind of sense and tell that maybe they did read it deeply, maybe someone on their team read it deeply, maybe they didn't, but you don't have a sense of it and there's no actionable information for you to work on. So that is number one of the ways that they can respond. Number two is a more personalized rejection. It's when they give you a more specific response about why they didn't like your manuscript. They might say, oh, the main character needs more voice, or I thought that Act 2 was lacking, or I wanted more of a sense of environment, or I think the plot needs to be more proactive. This can be feedback where if you're getting similar feedback across the board, across different agents that you're working with, you can kind of note this and take into consideration if or when your submissions process is done and you're considering editing your book for round 2. Another one that's really interesting is a request for revisions and submission. And this is when an editor is really interested in your book, but typically they don't really fully want to invest in it. And before they acquire it, or their team wants to acquire it, they have revision and submission ideas. And the reason that this option is interesting and maybe not ideal for authors is that you can spend as much time working on a revision and resubmit, and there's still no actual guarantee that the editor is going to like your book. So this can be a gamble based on maybe it's an editor and a publisher that you really want, or maybe they have a really cool idea about the marketing plan or where they could see the book ending up in the world, or maybe their revisions are things that you really like and you think they can actionably make the book better no matter what they are. And another thing to consider in all of this is that typically when you are pitching your book to an editor, it's not the editor that has to say yes. They typically have to go into one of their, I think it's like a weekly or bi-monthly meetings, but editors at publishing houses typically have meetings with different heads of the other teams. And if an editor likes a book, they're going to pitch the book to the rest of their team, and they have to come to a communal agreement across the different departments in a publishing house on whether or not this book can be a good deal for them. And the things they might consider are, have we published something similarly in the recent past? Have we published something similarly that it didn't do well? Is this something that we don't think we can market or make break out well? Are we not sure where it can be placed in the market? Do we not think the book is good enough or there yet? Do we think it might need too much editing? And some of the things that they're going to consider in this larger meeting, I'm going to list a few of these off. Market potential, so identification of the book's primary audience and market segment, marketing trends, competitive analysis, content and quality, how good is the writing, how unique is it, what is the narrative strength, does it have series potential depending on the genre that you're working on? Another one that's really big is author platform and engagement. And I know that there's been a lot of talk about this in the industry, but author platform and engagement is basically if you have a larger platform, if you were known in a certain industry in a certain way, if you're considered an expert, a highly sought after expert, all of these are things that might help you when an editor and their publishing house is considering your manuscript. But there's also a lot of talk in the industry about how publishing houses fixate too much on platform, especially from a social media perspective, because they assume that followers will equal book sales, which isn't always the case unless you're an author past a certain kind of platform. And then editorial and production considerations. So is this the right editor? What kind of editorial effort will have to go into this manuscript, and what are the production costs? Is it a book that is highly specialized? We'll need a lot of photos, special pages, a certain kind of binding. All of these are considerations. Marketing and publicity potential. So is the author someone who's poised in interviews and used to doing media? Are they someone who's extremely introverted and anti-platform? Are there certain publicity opportunities that might come up based on certain anniversaries, XYZ, related to the book or the project that is being submitted? And then another one is financial considerations, rights and licensures, long-term potential XYZ. And so those are some of the things that an editor and their team will consider when they're in that meeting and deciding whether or not to acquire the rights for your book. Another response that an editor can have is that they will come back and they will give you a full offer. A full offer is really exciting, and it can make you jump for joy, and you've been waiting for so long and blah, 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 blah. But a full offer is typically when one editor and their publishing house is interested in your book, and this can be broken down into a few simple steps. First, your full offer will typically be a short email or a short conversation that you have with your agent where they give you the basics of the deal. You aren't maybe even reading a full contract. So they're going to tell you what your advance payment is, what your royalty rates are. Your royalty rates are the percentage that you earn per copy of the book sold. And another distinction here is that if based on what your advance is, your royalty rates might be something that are really important. So basically, if you are publishing with a press or a publisher that is giving you a smaller advance, based on their marketing or promotion or how good they are, typically a smaller advance means that it's easier to earn out. Earning out is when you sell enough copies of your book at the royalty rate that you will earn as the author for that amount of copies sold times that royalty rate to amount to your advance. And so if your book is being sold for $20 and your royalty rate is 20%, that's going to be, oh God, that's going to be $4 per book. And if your advance is $5,000, you'll need to sell enough copies of your book at that rate of $4 per book to amount to $5,000. And what does that amount to? That's roughly over, let's guesstimate and say it's between 4,000 and 5,000 copies. So I was working through the edit on this. Apparently, I don't know math. I said, let me replay this again. 4,000 and 5,000 copies, 4,000 and 5,000 copies, my math is bad. So if you're trying to sell a $20 book and your royalty rate is 20%, that's going to be $4. I just literally put it in the calculator. I don't know what the fuck I was thinking. For a $5,000 advance, if your royalty rate is $4 a book, to earn out, you need to sell 1,250 copies of your book, which, depending on your publisher, depending on what they're doing, it might be more possible. But I just need to do this disclaimer, like, I am a writer. I'm not good at math. Sorry. I mean, of course, it's going to depend on your press and the size of the print run and XYZ and the promotion and the awards. But typically, earning out is a good sign because it shows that the investment that your publisher made into your book ended up being worth it on their end, which is a good sign for whatever next publisher or next book that you're considering. If you have a higher advance, and there are all different kinds of considerations around why authors might want to take a higher advance, but if you have a higher advance, depending on your publisher, whether or not they're really behind your book or they're doing lackluster work, it might be harder to earn out, and it might do you some damage in the long run to take a bigger advance. But we can talk about advances and all the different considerations behind that later on. But some of the other things that are going to come up in this initial offer is territorial rights. So the specific regions and areas of the world where your publisher wants to agree to sell your book. A lot of publishers ask for North American rights plus the Philippines, or World English rights, or North American and European rights. And depending on your advance and what kind of rights they want, you might want to negotiate the kind of rights you are going to give them, because maybe you want to sell your book in a different region or territory in the future, and that's something that your agent could help you with. Another one is formats. So what formats of the book does the publisher want to commit to publishing? Typically, if it's beyond mass paperback, typically a publisher will publish the hardcover first, and then about a year or so later, they'll come out with the paperback. And then another format that is highly sought after or considerable is audiobook, because audiobooks are really on the rise. A lot of people love them. And there are even some big 5 publishers that say, we won't sell a book unless we can definitely have the audiobook rights. And so once you get this initial offer, you typically have a call with your agent. And this is kind of the point where things can get a little complicated or simple or XYZ. And also in this initial offer process, the editor will most likely let you know things that are really core or vital about changes, edits, feedback that they have on the manuscript. Based on the feedback that an editor might have, it might give you a sense of how closely they're reading your book, how much they understand it, how much their vision of it is aligned with yours. And so it's really important to consider the fact that when you're looking at this offer, it's not just the numbers and what you're being sold and what you're being offered. It's also about your own feelings about the book, your agent's feeling about the book, and whether or not this editor is the right fit. Are they someone that will edit in a very sort of anonymous way? Are they really hands-on? They're going to want to video chat and call you. What is the timeline of how they want you to edit the book? All of these are things that might come up during this initial offer process. And once you take all of this information in, it's really important to talk to your agent. It's really important to take a day or two to process and to really think about what aspects of this offer work for you, what aspects don't. And then you want to go back to your agent and talk to them about your considerations for negotiation. And another thing to consider, which is sort of a dream situation, it's a dream situation, is when you go on submissions and your book goes on fucking auction. An auction is when there are numerous editors and publishers interested in your book at the same time. And this can be a strategy thing that your editor deploys. Typically when you're in submissions, and if 1 or 2 editors are interested, your literary agent might nudge other editors and let them know, hey, I know that you're still reviewing the manuscript or the pitch letter, but I just want to let you know that there are other folks interested in this book and we are going into negotiations with them. And this can be really good because it can light a fire under other people's asses and let them know, like, oh, this book is incentivized in some way by these editors, so maybe I need to check in on this. Because the thing about submissions that's interesting is that you don't really know what's happening behind the scenes. Like, your agent might have a close relationship with an editor XYZ, but editors are busy. They're editing stuff, they're going over contracts, they're working through active ongoing contracts that they have. And also, it's not like every editor communicates in the same way. It's not like every editor gets back to you in a timely fashion. And so having one person interested in your book might nudge the others. Typically, an auction process goes like this. Multiple offers will come in, your agent will be notified, and then they will notify you, and then some kind of auction process or date will be set. And there are different kinds of auctions. I'm going to read off a few of them. A round robin auction is when each publisher submits a bid in specific order, typically round robin style, with each round giving publishers the chance to increase their offer. So this involves bidding rounds, and then this process continues until there are no more higher bids made. Another one is the best bid auction. Publishers submit their highest and best offer by specific deadline, 1 round of bidding, and the highest offer wins. Another one is a set bid auction. The agent sets specific bid increments and rounds. Publishers must increase their bid by at least a set amount in each round. And then some other things to take into consideration is the agent's role, how hands-on they want to be, what their vision is, the author's input, so how heavily the prospective editors are willing to hear out the author and what they want out of the process. And then typically you choose which of these offers you like the best, the announcement is made, and then you go on to sign your contract. And so regardless if you're working with one editor or you're going through an auction process, you're ideally going to negotiate your contract to a point where you/your agent feels comfortable. Ideally, you will feel comfortable. And then you go into the process of agreeing on those terms and then awaiting the contract. Awaiting the contract can take a minute. Like, I think with my first book, it probably took like maybe 2 weeks. I'm probably also even thinking, did it take a month? But I was anxious. I wanted to read it. Me and my agent got the contract, and then you usually accept the offer. And in the contract, there are a few things that they're going to work through. There are going to be key sections that they're going to be drafting out, which is the payment schedule, details on when your advance will be paid. Typically, advances are paid in 3 or 4 increments. They're paid, the first third is when you sign your contract. The second third is when you turn in your final manuscript through the editing process. And then the last third is when your book actually is published. And then manuscript delivery and acceptance. So by what date do they want your manuscript to be delivered? What is the timeline? When do they imagine the different parts of the editorial process happening? My publisher, my first book, When They Tell You to Be Good, my editor told me, we want to put this out next year, in a year. So that means we're gonna need to edit in the next 6 months. Are you ready? And I was like, fuck yes. I was so excited. And then rights and obligations, and of course, termination clauses. So what are the considerations and different reasons why a publisher might terminate your contract? One thing to consider here is that I know in different podcasts I've listened to, the morality clause is something that a lot of people should heed and look out in their contracts. The morality clause is basically a clause in your contract that says that if you commit some kind of immoral act or something that is open to public scrutiny, your publisher can rescind your book contract. And this has come up since like more rises in anti-fascism and alt-right figures and more controversial figures who are fucked up or racist trying to publish books, and the publishers are like, But then this can also have implications for people that are poor, marginalized, incarcerated, gay, queer, etc., depending on the publisher or the editor that you have. So those are some things that you should consider. You will receive your contract, and ideally your agent will go over the contract in detail, look at the language. This is one of the reasons that having an agent is so important. When I sold my first book, I went on submissions at the beginning of 2021. For about 6 months, I had, let's call my agent Ethan. I had Ethan for about 6 months, and then in those 6 months, Ethan also told me, I'm gonna be changing careers. I won't be on submissions with this book for forever, but if it sells, of course, I will go through the whole process of selling it for you, with you. The book wasn't sold through that agent, and after that agent and I parted ways, I got reached out to personally by an editor who offered to read my manuscript, read it, and liked it.
August 19th, it's almost noon. I think I just got a book offer from an editor, a good editor. I'm going to hear more back next week, but I just have to document. I feel like crying. I don't feel like it's real yet. I feel like I don't want to tell anyone yet. But I'm almost literally in shock. Like, it doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel real.
And I knew I don't have an agent. I know that a contract is coming my way, and I know every single rule in the book says you at least should run it by a lawyer, someone who is versed in publishing law, legal, like literary law, or you need an agent who is trusted to look it over for you. And so what I did during that process is, because I had a book offer but no agent, I leveraged my book offer, because at the time I was actively querying new agents. I leveraged my book offer and I emailed all the agents on my list that I was interested in. And I said, hey, I have a book offer. I'm seeking representation. I need someone I could trust. And so I went through all of these different agents, because basically I didn't know what the fuck I was reading. I could make educated guesses about what should be in the contract, but it didn't seem fair to me to go in blind when all I really wanted was someone in my corner to make the process less stressful for me. And so legal review is really important, because you want to know that you're getting a good deal, and we can't on our own always do the research. There are a lot of industry norms that we might not be aware of. And so it's good to have someone in your corner that really understands what's going on. And then after the legal review, once all parties agree on the final terms, then you sign your contract. Woo! You sign your contract. And then you probably drink some champagne, then you're probably gonna celebrate, and then you're probably gonna wait for your advance. You're gonna wait for your advance. You're gonna wait for your advance. And then once your book contract is signed, I believe it's like a thing where you don't want to announce it right away. And granted, this depends on your publisher. Like, some publishers are very quick with how they announce it, but typically you don't want to announce that your book has been sold until your publisher announces it or until it ends up in publishing marketplace. And granted, this can depend on your editor, publisher, agent, etc., process, whatever. Basically, the submissions process, because after this, then you go through editing and the different parts of the editorial process and production and marketing and then publication. We have talked about the different parts of the book submissions process, and I hope this was helpful. For the second part of this video, I want to delve more into my specific experience as a writer in the industry that has been published, because I do think it's important for when we have these videos that it break down the different parts of the process. I want to talk about the things that can be weird, ugly, strange. And so I kind of mentioned basically what my submissions process was like before. But what I really enjoyed is that when I got my new agent, while I had my book offer, my agent is Samantha Haywood at Transatlantic Agency. She's fire. She's absolutely fire. The reason it was so helpful is that my agent helped wrangle my fear through the negotiation process, through the editing process, help push back on things in the editing process that I didn't like. It's not like anything major came up, but an agent is really there to be in your corner and be on your side. And submissions can be really stressful. It can really destabilize your sense of self. I check out those videos I did, but literally one of my submissions vlogs from a few years ago, I'm crying. I'm crying. And it wasn't easy. It wasn't fun either. It was really hard for me, especially as a Black artist, because 2020 was embroiled by so many protests around George Floyd and so many calls for diversity in the publishing industry. And that book, American Dirt, was called out. And there was this really public and visible call for more diverse books. And I was selling a memoir about my experiences as a queer Jamaican American, as a traveler, as an anarchist. And it felt fucked up to be sold this vision of change in an industry and then to actually enter the part where you're supposed to get paid, where your background is supposed to be acknowledged, intersectionality, XYZ, and nobody wanted it. And I think it can be very confusing when the industry is sending all these messages or signals that maybe what you're working on or your particular background or identity is really sought after, and then you actually get to the business part of the process and it's just capitalism. This is why submissions can be hard, because when you look at the numbers, diverse editors and publishers are leaving all sorts of presses. AI is all scaring everybody, might be taking away jobs. And there is this conundrum in the industry where it says it wants one thing, but reliably it will overspend and overbuy authors of white backgrounds, basic ass backgrounds, books by white writers that are really fucked up about other communities, and they'll throw all this money at them. And where's the POC money? I'm looking under the table for it. Where's the POC money? It can be strange, especially as a debut author, when you feel the lack of enthusiasm or attention compared to other debuts that you might see online that are getting big advances and are going on big tours. And I think submissions is the process where you can really begin to start really deeply comparing yourself to other writers. And I think another big thing that really, really struck me the first time I went on submissions that I really had to wrangle with is the fact that as a debut author, I was the closest I'd ever been to my dream of being traditionally published. And the fact that rejections were happening, and these were form rejections, and I wasn't really getting a clear sense of how my book could be changed or improved, it was very depressing and destabilizing to be so close to my dream and to in some way have to admit, like, this might not work out. I'm the closest I've ever been, and this might not work out. And this thought, this nihilism, this sadness is very real, should be acknowledged, but it's also important to have a few tips that might help you along the way. And so I want to give you a few tips and considerations for any author or writer going to the submissions process to kind of help you wrangle your fear a little bit. So let's dig into it. So first tip is to be really clear and intentional about how you plan to communicate with your agent throughout the submissions process. And so this looks like when your agent says, hey, I think your book is ready for submissions, at least over email, if not on an actual phone call, Ask questions. Come up with a list of goals and considerations that you want to have for going on submissions. Do you want to work with a smaller press, an indie press, a university press, a more mid-level publisher? Do you want to go for the big five? Are there certain editors that you want to work with? Is there a certain advance number that you want? Are there certain territories that you want the book to be sold in? Are there certain rights that you want to acquire? Are there editors of a certain background that you would prefer? All of these are things that you can bring up, question, ask. How many rounds of submissions do they plan to go on? How long is each round? Another big thing that I recommend is have a conversation with your agent about how you want the submissions news to be communicated to you. When I first went on submissions, one thing that really upset me is that every time we got a rejection, my agent would email me that day. And I didn't know or consider or think about all the different ways that people could be given this news. But I think it just sucked that when you're on a submission journey that's kind of difficult and you're getting more rejections, and I mean, it's like what they say, all you need is one yes, but all you need is a lot of no's. And so it was really just fucking sad to like just get rejection after rejection. And I'm like, oh my God, like maybe I didn't need to fucking read this. And so have a conversation with your agent. And some things you can consider are maybe you want a weekly update. Maybe you want a bi-weekly update. Maybe you want to receive an email at the end of every 2 weeks about the rejections. Maybe you just want to be told the feedback that has been received. Maybe you want to be told the positive feedback that is received. Maybe you only want to hear about the rejections at the point where it's been a month or two and your agent's like, we need to talk about what round two might look like. And so all of these are different considerations, but based on your emotional psyche, how you handle rejection, how it's going to deal with your mental health. Like, when I tell you those rejections from our first rounds of submissions, they were beating my fucking ass. They were boom, 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 boom. And I didn't expect it to be that hard. And I think that is what took it out of me because of course, you can talk to your agent and process and you want to, but I'm not someone that's going to like really complain to my agent. Oh, but I will cry in private. I'll suffer in silence. I'll get drunk and talk to my friends and be like, my dream's never gonna happen. And they'll be like, no, 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 you just have to. I'm like, no, don't tell. No, I have to admit it. Have an agent who will fight for it for me. I don't know. Maybe that's why it feels scarier in a way, because I think until now, I didn't really fully have to consider the realities of like whether or not someone who I don't know. The other objective thing is a memoir is, according to my agent, one of the hardest genres to sell. So it can be really destabilizing and it's really important to like take care of your mental health. Consider the things that are really going to make you feel good or bad during this process. And maybe talk to other writers if you can. Tip I have is to ask for the pitch letter and the list of editors that your book is going out to. And this isn't to necessarily seek like to give your agent approval. And it might not even necessarily to give feedback, but you can. But you might just want to research, have an idea of where it's going out to, have a sense of how large your submissions pool is. And even with your pitch letter, it can be really fun to just read how someone else would describe your work. I did this yesterday. I asked my agent to send me my pitch letter and they did, and I gave feedback on just like 2 different phrases that I thought could be changed to kind of reflect what I think the book is about more. And that was really good. And it made me feel good because I felt more linked into the process. Just some lasting tips is don't reach out to editors that your book is going on submissions to. You maybe wouldn't consider following them, but it's highly, highly recommended that you do not reach out to editors because it puts a wrench in the process. They may feel like you're pressuring them, and typically it's your agent's job to reach out to them individually, personally, before you even get involved in the process. And you could like literally just fuck it up and they'll be like, well, what is this newbie doing? One thing I've heard from writers and podcasts is that if you're on submissions, check your social medias and check to see who's following you, because sometimes if a publisher or an editor is interested in your manuscript and you haven't heard back yet, sometimes they might follow you online because they're trying to scope out their prospect. Maybe. And the last tip is really, really important. It's really, really important. Find other things in your life to occupy your time. If you're someone that obsesses, overthinks, stresses, is going to be worried about it, biting your nail, blah, 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 find other things. Start drafting up another book. Start outlining another book, start researching another book. Find some other hobby or thing to start up or jump back into. Find a new project. Find things to distract yourself, because I promise you, it's going to be really easy to obsess, and it's not going to help you in the long run, because no matter what happens, you stressing out isn't going to help you. And I think that's the thing. It's like, up until when you've like literally edited your book, past that point, you got to let Jesus take the wheel. Like stressing out about it, researching, trying to research everything, like going back to your agent all the time. You're not gonna, it's not really gonna change things. It might like affect one or two things, but stressing yourself out isn't gonna make your submissions process any better, and it'll most likely just make it worse. So thank you for watching this video. If you want more videos like this, comment with questions you have about the book publishing process. If you're new to this channel, I share all kinds of other videos about queer readings of Black history, about the writing life. If you want more writing videos, comment below and let me know. Let me know what other questions you have about the book publishing process, what other things you want to know. If you want to support this channel, please, please, please consider becoming a channel member, which will give you early access to all of these videos, or becoming a patron, which will also give you early access to all these videos. I really enjoy everything that I've been putting out, but the only thing that would really help me is if I were to get more support from channel members or patrons. You can sign up for a few bucks a month. It would help me out a lot, make this channel way more sustainable for me, and give me a lot more space and room to up the production and the things that I'm talking about. And maybe I'll even bring on other guests and other people. But thank you for watching this video. I have a new short book that's out right now called The Black Radical Reader. It's in the links of all of my videos and in my social media bios. It's a short collection of essays about different figures in Black history and different mediations on the necessity of Black solidarity with Palestine. So consider checking that out. And thank you for being here. Happy writing.